Welcome back to the Trending Communicator. I'm your host, Dan Nestle. Don't you just love conferences? I mean, to me, there's no better way to learn about what's important or what you should be paying attention to in your field or industry. And if you're a communicator or a marketer, conferences can be a powerful platform for reputation and influence and business development or straight up awareness. And yet, like me, does just thinking about the costs drive up your anxiety straight through the roof? Because it does for me. Well, you've got to decide where to spend your budget and where you'll get the most media coverage and where you'll exert the most influence, and where will your executives and subject matter experts get the most out of their time and then stand out among their peers. It's tough. It's a tough order. There's so much to think about. Got to think about attendees, wider audiences, content relevance, the opportunity cost of time, networking value, ROI. It just crushes the mind sometimes to think about where you're going to put your money for conferences. So why do many of us choose these events based on things like past experience or feelings? FOMO, vanity, optics, peer pressure, whatever it is, there's got to be a better way. Fortunately, my guest today is here to help. A leader in the field of communications technology, aka commtech, member of the Fast Company Executive Board and Forbes Communication Council. She's at the cutting edge of applying a data-driven, AI-powered approach to choosing conferences and measuring their impact for your organization. A lifelong communications pro with a background in comms and branding in pharma and healthcare. A few years ago, she left her career behind to start her own tech company that delivers intelligence and ROI for every conference. She also happens to be one of my classmates in the PR Week Dashboard 25 class of 2023. Please welcome to the show a truly trending communicator, the CEO of Sproxxy, Melanie Samba.
Thank you so much, Dan. That was incredible.
Well, you deserve it. You've had a heck of a career. And now Sproxxy, and that's SPROXXY for those listeners. Sproxxy is live, launched, and killing it as far as I've heard and know. What a great platform, but really what a great solution to a problem that I think so many have, but don't really realize it. We'll get into that, I think, a little bit, a lot maybe during our program here today. But, I haven't really done much in the way of talking about events and conferences. It's not something I think that comes up in your typical everyday conversation when you're talking comms. You're talking about media, you're talking about, social media, you're talking about, coverage and reputation, things like this. And events sometimes falls under marketing, sometimes it falls under communications, but it is such an important channel for us in our profession. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about conferences, about why you chose conferences, why this is the area of your purpose and mission for Sproxxy, and get into the cool stuff that you're doing with tech and with AI and how it's going to make everybody's life who deals with the problems I mentioned before a lot easier. That's kind of what I want to draw from our conversation today. Of course, send people over to check Sproxxy out. But first, Mel, how did you get to where you are? I mean, you started off in comms and you took a jump that so many of us dream of, admire, or fear, which is to go out on your own, start a company. So tell us the Melanie Samba story.
Thank you. So I started off, I still am a corporate comms executive. I've been doing corporate comms and marketing for over 20 years. I remember one of my very first, opportunities, I was graduating and an author pretty much pulled me aside. He was releasing his first book. He wanted to be positioned as a thought leader. The focus was money for retirement. So he was targeting the baby boomer generation. And so I pretty much booked him at every single conference that Susie Orman was speaking at. That was my strategy.
to get in front of Susie Orman.
Yes. And so when I marketed him, I pretty much was like, he spoke with or next to. That was the way that I marketed him. That was 20 years ago. So I did not really run or decide conferences was the alley I actually wanted to go to. It was just one of the additional things that I needed to do as a marketing and comms professional on behalf of every single organization or leader that I worked with. It was a strategy. It was a medium to me just to get whatever message I wanted to get out to, whatever targeted audience that I put in my plan for the end of the year. It was just at that point of time a medium that I was using as well, along with media, along with advertising and everything else that we do as comm professionals. So throughout my career, as a part of my comm strategy, I used to have to always put together the annual plan, depending on what I worked in-house and also in the agency throughout the years. And I also worked as a consultant for individuals. And putting together that plan, it consisted of everything that we do as comm professionals, including conferences. I began having issues managing conferences because I did more than just set up the speaking opportunity. As you know, as a comms professional, you're also writing the speeches or putting together the key messages or setting up the media at the conference or setting up any type of meeting with whomever that's at the conference with your leader or even working on the potential partnership opportunities. Like you're doing all things. And I was using Excel spreadsheets, so at first it was just something that I had to do. Everyone, and I still believe everyone knows conferences is something that you just have to do. Like you just got to do it.
Yeah, certainly in our profession, and again, I use the term a little broadly because it's comms, it's marketing, marcom, whatever.
Yes.
It's always part of the kind of, you called it a medium, right? It's one of the channels that you're going to choose. It's there for like, oh, what are we going to do about conferences? And I think a lot of people don't understand that when you choose to do a conference or participate in a conference, the amount of work that goes behind that, is just like it is for any other initiative or project, but like compressed into a 2 or 3 day period, where everybody and their cousin is in one place. And you have this kind of remarkable, unique opportunity to do something. So the pressure's on to do something,
Yes.
And it's such a, like, it's always an also ran like an afterthought for a lot of companies. Like, oh yeah, we got to do conferences. So, why do you think that is the case, that a lot of, people in our world and a lot of, I guess, the commercial sides of our businesses that we work with think of conferences as this kind of nice to have that can be crossed off if we start to run short of budgets?
I think from a corporate comms point of view, it's the case because, as you know, as a corporate comms leader, you're always proving the value of your role to the commercial team or the marketing team. You're always proving why PR is important or why communication strategy is important. And so with conferences as well, with thought leadership, that is unfortunately, because as a comms professional, you always have to prove the value of comms. It unfortunately is just under that same umbrella. The marketing team and the sales development team or business development team, they get the budget right away because they're going into a conference for sales specifically for deal flow that's happening at a conference. They're exhibiting, they do get the budget right away. However, what I found is most organizations on the corporate communication side, they don't even know what the budget should be. They have no idea what the budget is. The CEO is always asking why they're going somewhere, but they will go, depending on who's at the event. And they're also doing it for other purposes. They're doing it for brand awareness, for ego, to rub elbows with other leaders in the industry, to make sure they're seen as the thought leader in the industry or a leader specifically in their industry. So they're going there. I think with conferences, where the miss is, every single department, when you're thinking about a larger organization, every single department is participating in conferences, and whether they're aligned or a spokesperson for the organization or not, they're still representing their company when they go to an event and they're putting your corporate, whatever your brand name is next to their name at the event. And when I was working with one organization, it was a pharmaceutical company, and I had to work directly with our chief legal officer. This is really where the idea of Sproxxy came about, is because they tasked me with trying to be like the person and pretty much approve every single individual that was going to conferences, throughout the organization, approve those DACs, put together what the protocols were, because it's pharmaceutical, so there's highly regulated. If you say the wrong thing, there may be a charge or a fee or something that you have to pay. And so I had to, beyond just the leadership team, manage and try to strategize on who was representing us at whatever conference, making sure everyone knew we're all one voice. We all have to say the same messages. We cannot say one thing. We cannot reveal what's about to happen next before the FDA approves. There was so much that I had to do with over 400 employees for this pharmaceutical company, in the headquarters space. And it was overwhelming, and still doing it with Excel spreadsheets.
Yeah.
That was the point where I felt like there needed to be a software. And to be honest, I made a joke about it. I was with my corporate comms team. I said, a software can handle this. And we all laughed. And it wasn't like I was like, oh, I want to be a software maker, or I want to create this company. It was just like, this is too much. Like, there has to be a software that can handle this, And so after I said it, it was like, oh, you know what? A software can handle it. It was like the light bulb kind of.
It's you identified what my friend Mark Schaefer would call a seam, right? Like an opening, or kind of a leading edge to something, that is going to be very, important in the future, that leads to the white space that you should be able to take advantage of if you have the right strategy and tools. And, I can tell you that everything you're talking about, or especially all the drudgery around conferences, again, people don't see this and understand it. Now you brought up an important distinction, which is that, in pharma, in finance, in highly regulated industries, it's a little bit of a different ballgame when you're sending people to a conference, because, a lot of media people, a lot of comms people, you have an interview or set up, or you have an event or an activity, you have one spokesperson, right? One or two.
Right.
But at a conference, every attendee is essentially a spokesperson. Everyone, all the salespeople who typically don't really know or care about what we do, they have to suddenly have these talking points. And it takes a little bit of an internal cultural mindset shift to make that happen sometimes. But not every conference is equal, right? So when you're dealing with those highly regulated industries, there's a lot more that has to go into prepping people to go, versus like a trade show where you're out there doing business development. But it's fascinating because you saw that need, and how many people actually ever act on those things, right? So you took that jump. So how between the time that you had that aha moment, you found that seam, how long was it before you're like, you know what, there's a there, I'm going to go in that direction?
To be honest, when I first had the idea, I was doing well in my career. There was not a part of me that said I wanted to be a tech founder one day. That wasn't really the future that I had for myself. So originally, to be honest, I was being selfish with the idea. I just needed something to prove to the people that I was working with, why they were going to conferences and why I was doing a good job. So the first version of Sproxxy was just for myself. There was no name. It was just, let me provide the rationale to my client, to my leader on why I'm selecting a certain conference to them. That is all I needed. And so that was the very first version of Sproxxy. However, while developing that version of Sproxxy, again, I was not even planning on productizing it. The pandemic ended up happening.
Oh, yeah.
So
I remember that.
Once the pandemic happened, what's interesting is one of my main clients laid me off. They said, well, our leader is not going to be going to conferences, because it's a pandemic. And I'm like, what do you mean? There's actually going to be more events now because of the pandemic. And the only reason I knew that is because back in 2008, this also because I've been doing this so long, back in 2008, when the housing crisis happened, the amount of conferences exploded at the same time as the housing crisis. Like every single publication started to host events. Remember when all the publications started shutting down and they started to switch from print to going to, that is what happened. They started creating portfolios and programs around events. And so I already knew that when the pandemic happened, that there was going to be an explosion of events. And
did you realize that at the time that it would be this whole new virtual angle to events? Yeah.
I knew that there was going to be a virtual angle. There were already virtual events happening, but no one really was taking any virtual events seriously until the pandemic happened. And then it was like the need to just be in the community with your peers and find out what's going on because you're no longer in the office. So the amount of events actually doubled during the pandemic. There's 1.8 million industry events being hosted. I also, because I've been in this role for a long time and working with a lot of different organizations on conference strategy and comm strategy, I already knew what the landscape was going to look like. I already knew what conference organizers, they also, because I've been in this field, contact me to find out what the other conference is doing, And so I was able to find out, where it was originally one large event that was happening, they would now have it smaller and have regional events, So I ended up finding out the playbook on how every conference organizer or big event was going to manage the pandemic. They broke up their events to virtual. Now they have virtual, hybrid, in person,
everything
in different regions. There's so many different things happening.
Yeah.
That was the point.
Yeah. Did you, I'm just curious, like you seem to have, okay, for those listeners out there, oftentimes PR pros and communicators are kind of like judged a little bit based on how many contacts they have among the media. How many contacts do you have? If you ever go look at job descriptions for like corp comms people, it's like, we want somebody who comes with contacts in XX industry, in the media. And while I have my own argument with that, I because the changing nature of digital communications and certainly of the media landscape, it shouldn't be given as much weight as it used to. But we can put that aside. It sounds like you had a very similar, analogous kind of network among conference organizers.
Yes.
And I can count on one hand and one finger the number of people now that I know who've done that. So how long did it take you to build that? And was it sheer force of will? Were you reaching out? Were you just going to conferences?
I think it was organically based off of my role of pitching executives to be on the stage or trying to figure out what type of program they were planning for the next year. As far as my strategy on manually, when I would work with a brand, I will know a whole year ahead of what the full next year is going to look like for a conference organizer like a Forbes, or I'll know every single thing before they make it even public knowledge, because I was able to build those relationships and even contribute to what the program or what those events could look like.
Mm-hmm.
Those relationships, it's just like media. It's developing the relationship just like you. And it's actually, to be honest with you, it's hand in hand. Media and conference strategy is hand in hand. So what I would do is build those relationships out just as I would with a reporter. That was a part of my job, going to meet them. In East Coast, most of the publications, most event organizers are based in the New York or tri-state area, going to meet them for coffee, just like you would with a reporter. Yeah. Introducing your executive to that conference organizer or whoever that's developing content well before the conference, so that they can actually take some of the ideas from your executive and insert it into their program. So I did all of that. Yeah. Throughout my full career. And that's led to the relationships that I've been able to build.
Tell you, anybody who thinks that salespeople have the monopoly on building relationships and slowly kind of building up persuasion so that they can achieve a particular goal, in their case, to a transaction of some sort, I think they're really missing the boat. There is so much relationship building that goes on in our world here. Yes. And I think you've just laid out a really excellent case study of that. And that must be one of the values I think that's driving Sproxxy for sure, as the founder. I did want to dig into something that you said actually about conferences themselves. And I jump around. It's what I do in these conversations.
I love this.
You talked about the need to be in a community, and there's a lot of motivations for participating in or paying for or sponsoring or just kind of speaking at a conference. But that need to be part of a community, I'm almost ashamed I didn't include that in my upfront introduction, because it is true that is extremely, extremely important. And it is personally, when I make personal decisions about going to specific conferences, that might be the very first thing that I think about. I go to a conference every year, or well, not every year, but the last couple of years, I've been going to this very unique, and it's kind of like an unconference in some ways. It's only 30 people go. But the reason I go is not only to learn and understand what the future of marketing and communications is about, because I think the room of people there, they have incredible insight. It's really because that group of people, of the 30, maybe 7 or 8 are always repeaters. And it's just a great community.
Yes.
So, I think that can't be underestimated. So do you think, there are other, not do you think, what do you think are the other real motivators for choosing a conference, or for participating in conferences, and why are they so important?
Well, I do want to touch on the community part a bit more, sure, especially because of the pandemic. And I am like the number one person to say I'm so tired of talking about the pandemic.
For sure.
However, I would say post-pandemic, if we're actually there, I'm not sure if that's the case. However, conferences are now the meeting spots. I literally met my head of corporate comms at a conference in Portugal. I met her for the first time. And we live maybe 30 minutes tops away from each other.
That's amazing.
Yes. So conferences at this point in time, coming out of the pandemic, is where you're meeting your peers. That's where you're meeting everyone in your industry that knows what is going to happen within the industry. That's where you're meeting, the thought leaders or people that's pushing the industry forward. If you're just going for inspiration alone, there are certain conferences that you would select to go to. Then you will be selecting conferences as a corporate comms person on behalf of your executives based off of the audience. Again, still the audience.
Yeah.
The number one thing that we need to reach is a specific demographic or a specific audience based off of the corporate goals of the brands that we're working with. And so that's dependent on like what they have planned for the year, if they're releasing a product in a certain market, or they're just trying to target a specific audience. The best place to go is the conference to meet face to face with that leader or a customer or potential partner. And for me, I am very media, I really do focus on media. The best place for me to go to meet media is actually at a conference. They're actually a little more open and nicer and want to speak to me. When I'm at the conference, they're looking for topics and content. They're there as well for the 3 days. So they've blocked out this time to speak with people at the conference that they think have a unique story. So that's the best time to meet them.
Do you find that, like, just on that media point for a second, do you find that, well, we all know trust in media has plummeted. It's probably at the worst point it's ever been in my memory, for sure. And, as a result, it's one of the causative factors for the decline in media readership and in media interaction. So, those media businesses are closing more and more. There's fewer reporters, there's fewer journalists. Is that affecting the conference circuit? Like, are there fewer journalists at the conferences, so it's harder to reach them, or how's that looking?
No, journalists are definitely going to conferences. That is, they're going there. They want to know what's going on in certain industries. Using the Portugal event that we went to, it was actually Web Summit. There were over 2,000 journalists there. So from all over the world, that is basically like the place to go to if you want to have 10 interview, literally a strategy that I used to do before launching Sproxxy. I worked with a CEO, and we would go to a conference and set up a room, contact every single journalist there, and do a round table like discussion so we could get like 20 different articles post-conference. Like, those are the types of strategies that I used to do when I went to an event. That is where they are.
We many of us work in, let me just say, less sexy industries. That are harder to attract attention. And you have internal stakeholders who are all about product announcements and product development, and maybe a trade show would be great for that. But to get the attention of journalists on a good day is hard. To get the attention of journalists in a field, at a conference is certainly, I think, of course, more focused. But even within that conference, you're competing with, larger companies or more famous CEOs or people who are the speakers on the stage versus just being an attendee. It's still a heavy lift, right?
I would say look at the conference as a campaign. Just like you said at the top of this call, it is really more of a campaign. So it doesn't really matter to the industry how niche it is. If you target a specific conference based off of the audience that is there, based off of what your corporate goals are first, get your executive a speaking opportunity there. At the same time, get the full list of all media that's going to be present so you can set up the interview as soon as he gets off the stage. At the same time, find out what competitors or potential partners are in the room. So you can just literally, you're leveraging that opportunity to do so much. And so by the time you come back from the conference, there is a return. It's beyond just the marketing person and the salesperson that's selling products. It really is. I really believe, and it's probably because I'm biased, I am a corporate comms person first.
Yeah.
We are the ones that push the brand. We position our brand. Our CEO is trusted now because he's on the stage by his peers and whatever his messaging is. We are pushing potential partnerships. We are securing media. We are even indirectly impacting sales. There
Of course.
is, conferences, it does materialize into actual sales. And so when you look at it from that point of view, from a marketing comms professional point of view on a brand level, there is a high return back to your organization based off of your conference strategy.
I couldn't agree more. And in, my current role, but also in previous lives, I suppose, I've seen us do it right. I've seen us do it wrong. I've seen everything in between. And, there are some conferences that are just astoundingly good, right? That you just go to and but I would imagine that there are hundreds, if not more, maybe thousands of smaller conferences out there that could have as great an impact on your organization. And especially if you look at it from a cost benefit point of view, right? I mean, we used to go, when I was at Mitsubishi Heavy years ago, we used to go to CERAWeek in Houston every year, world's biggest energy conference. Very expensive. And first year we just sent a small delegation, but every year the delegation grows or grew. And, the value of those conferences is just, you build a relationship with the organizers, and eventually now you're keynoting, and now you're having people in the sessions. And eventually, of course, you have a whole media strategy that goes along with it. So massive conference, big name. It was totally, visibly worth it. And from the CEO's perspective and from the business side's perspective, I think that they have a little bit more difficulty seeing that same value at smaller scale or less famous conferences and events. And look, I mean, that's, I think, where we have to go now with talking about, the state of conferences and with Sproxxy. What you've also positioned yourself, or you are not positioned yourself. You are a legitimate thought leader in this space. I mean, anybody who's been listening for the last 25 minutes or half hour now, has learned more about conferences in one sitting than probably they have their entire career. And thank you very much for that, Mel. You're clearly a thought leader in this space. Your State of Conferences report just came out. Can you talk us through that a little bit and tell us a little bit about what the State of Conferences is and why, first of all, why people should read this, but also, why people should be considering a broader conference strategy?
Yes. So last year we launched the State of Conferences report for the first time. So this year is our second year. The goal of the report is to look at conferences from a brand point of view, from the point of view of someone that's working in Marcom in-house or through an agency. So from, basically, again, self-serving, from our point of view. And the real goal is to find out what our peers are currently doing when it comes to conferences. What do they see as value right now when it comes to determining the success of conferences? And do they see it materializing for their brand? Do they see an increase of sending spokespeople? There's all those type of questions we ask, but it's really peer-to-peer insights. If you want to just get bottom line, peer-to-peer insights on conferences. So from a branding or marketing or communications point of view, so it's not the normal report that you would get on like the audience specifically. It's like, what are your peers doing in this space?
Right.
What we found in the report is one of the things that actually had me focus in on Sproxxy and really build it beyond for my use case is I was asked to join an accelerator where I pretty much figured out whether or not I want to move forward or if this was a real business. That was my decision by the end of the accelerator during the pandemic. And during that time, one of the tasks was doing customer development. So talking to a lot of corporate comm executives. Obviously, I already had a lot of relationships because I've been in corporate comms for a long time. And then also with conference organizers and finding out from them, like, what are their issues, their pain points, like, how are they currently managing conferences? And I ended up finding out that everyone has the same exact issue. Everyone is complaining across our full industry using Excel spreadsheets, or what I like to say is MacGyvering different solutions.
MacGyvering solutions to come. I'm taking that, Mel. Thank you.
Or, I mean, even less, just straight using email to manage conferences. So it's lost in email. No one knows what the actual return is. They know they're spending a lot of money in the space. No one knows how much they even need to, have budgeted. They don't know what audience to reach. Like, there's a lot of unknowns. Mm-hmm. And I've always been the person, like, you hear this term all the time, which you cannot measure, you cannot manage. You hear the term all the time. You can measure everything else from ads to marketing, but for some reason, even media, but for some reason with conferences, there was no real source of measurement. So for me, state of conferences was first to find out what my peers, what their focus, what are they focused in on for the next year.
And before you go further, I just want to, for our listeners, I want to draw a line here between conferences and trade shows because, trade shows, you have a booth, people come up to the booth, you scan QR codes now and it goes into, and you can measure the number of leads and you follow. It's much more attributable. You could do attribution to sales very, very easily. Conferences are different. What we're talking about here is a little different, or considerably different. We're talking about, platforms, thought leadership.
Yes.
Those kinds of things, branding. So, pardon me for interrupting. No. Please continue.
No, that's completely okay. So we are talking industry events that you're using for brand awareness, for positioning your thought leader, for building your brand, basically seeing what your peers are doing and really building your brand externally to all your key audiences. And so with state of conferences, some of the questions we focused in on was, what are you doing this upcoming year? Are you sending more spokespeople? Do you see this impacting your bottom line? Or what are your pain points? How are you measuring success? We gave 18 different metrics on measuring success at conferences. And 2 years in a row, audience reach was number one in regards to measuring success at conferences. So everyone basically is saying that the very first thing that they need to look at is the audience and whether or not we're speaking directly to the audiences that we already have as a part of our corporate communications or marketing strategy. And they need all details about that audience. That is what I'm getting back from that report. People are also looking at website traffic, media mentions, social media engagement from a corporate comms point of view. However, some of the differences that I've noticed is an in-house team, what they see as valuable is different than an agency. We did see that over 90% of agencies touch conference strategy in their day-to-day work. Over 90% of PR agencies, that is a part of their SOW or their scope. However, when they look at success or what they see as valuable are more vanity metrics. So it is the social media impressions, whether or not your thought leader's message is resonating with the audiences, media. However, with an in-house team, they're looking at strategic partnerships that happen from the conference, any sales that happen from the conference, all audiences, basically audience reach is number one. So just getting to the right audience is the number one metric that doesn't matter who you are, every single corporate comm or marketing executive is looking for. So it's a very interesting report that you can get some insights on your peers and see what they're doing when it comes to conferences year to year.
One of the cool takeaways from the report is the impact of speaking engagements, like specifically because I know as somebody who deals with the executive team all the time, I'm very fortunate. And sometimes you feel like, the heavens have opened up and rays of sunlight are shining upon your head when you have an executive who's like, yeah, sure, I'll go speak. That sounds great. It's not a phrase we hear all that often. It's often, seen as an important thing for them to do, and they understand this, but it's work, right? But I love it when they're very enthusiastic. But that's not always the case. So to prepare for that speaking engagement, what is the business impact that the report uncovered?
So to prepare for the speaking engagement, as far as business impact, we do see that it wasn't what I will know. I feel like the numbers has changed year to year. And so year one, it did seem that over 60% of the respondents saw a speaking engagement materialize. It is increasing. It depends on the audience. Again, if it's agency or in-house team, the amount of speaking engagements and whether or not they see speaking engagements materializing on behalf of the business. As far as speaking engagement, everyone's increasing the amount of speaking engagements. Every executive they know the value of speaking engagements. We did get that intel from the report. Most agencies are focused in on getting speaking engagements for the executives. The biggest issue is, what is the rationale? Like you just said, why are you going to this conference? What is the return? Also doing with Sproxxy, you can do a lot of peer-to-peer analysis in Sproxxy. Find out what your competitors are doing. If you're working with the CEO and there is, what is the competitor CEO doing on the conference circuit? You can find that out through Sproxxy. So you could find out all details about a conference from on a brand level. Let me be specific. What companies are participating, at what level they're participating. Are they exhibiting? Are they speaking? Are they just attending on a brand level? And you can literally pull a report on a specific brand and find out their activity. You can also find out what their topic focus is at conferences through Sproxxy. And the reason we provide those insights is to share with our users how to refine their strategy. So right now, manually, or if you're using different softwares to try to do social listening and then a different software, if you probably, I'm sure you're still just trying to figure it out manually by just Googling what everyone is doing in the field. What are your peers or your CEO's peers doing? Through the software, you can literally pull a report and share that with your executives. So you will have a data-informed report or data-informed answer back to why you're sending an executive to speak at a conference. Outside of the vanity part, this is just the top conference in the field, you'll have actual metrics that you can share. So that is some of the intel we did get from the state of conferences. We used, to be honest with you, the state of conferences, we used that report to really refine our product. So the first version of our product, based off of the respondents telling us the 5 different ways in which they measure success, that is under my analytics. That's how we're measuring success. And ROI at conferences is from those 5 metrics to start. We're literally delivering exactly what the marketing and comms professionals are telling us they're missing out on.
Wow. It's a big voice of customer survey. I mean, essentially. Yes. And people should take note that, when we as communicators, marketers do research, it's not just to have some numbers on a page or to convince somebody of something. There are 1,000 different ways you can interpret or find insights from research. And sometimes it can be self-serving to just figure out how to improve your business. And that may be the best kind of intel that we can get. You started talking about Sproxxy, inside, in the context of the report, but also some of the great things that the platform does and that you've developed. Can you go back a little bit? Because, look, everybody, I think a lot of my listeners know commtech, communications technology, big area of focus for me and for a lot of folks who come on the show. And again, I'll just give a very high level definition for those who may be hearing that term for the first time, commtech. But if you just think about how communications is enabling communicators to do their job better and measure the results in a way that matters to the business, that's probably the easiest way to think about it. Or if you're a marketer, just think about your MarTech stack and just kind of port it over to the top of the funnel, awareness and kind of PR type stuff. Very similar type of a setup. But it's like it's employing technology to do a job better. Now, we're both dashboard 25 people. We're supposed to be movers and shakers in the commtech space. I'm uneasy with that title, but I think I would gladly bestow it upon you many, many times over. The journey from corp comms into commtech to Sproxxy. I'm assuming that you didn't just say, okay, you know what, I think we need software. And then and up to that point, you were non-technical, right? There has to be something about your background and the way that you worked with technology and saw, commtech in your work. So what's the kind of flow that went from, employing commtech or innovating in commtech in some ways, I suppose, into Sproxxy? And then how does Sproxxy fit into the commtech stack?
Yeah, so
big question. I'm sorry.
It's a big question, but I love it. So with commtech, I guess just to even backtrack a little bit more, trying to sell commtech to investors has been like, what is commtech? What are you saying to me? What are you talking about? Is this even commtech? So I do want to share that a little bit, that this is such a new space, as far as developing solutions specifically for marketing and communication professionals and looking at it as a commtech solution. This is a new space for everyone beyond, even within our field. So it wasn't sexy, to choose, I wanted to create this type of commtech solution, or I even want to enter into MarTech. commtech is a subset of MarTech. So enter into MarTech trying to sell this commtech idea. It wasn't actually probably the best idea that I've heard when speaking to investors. However, because again, my experience in the field, when I saw commtech solutions, they all focused on media, and they focused on social listening or social media or traditional and social. There was nothing that answered the question on other parts of the comms or corporate comms workflow, like thought leadership. I didn't see it. And I literally, for one, I am a corporate comms person first. Before a tech person, again, investors tell me not to say this, but I'm like, I am just an executive that needed something. I'm an industry executive. I don't really even see myself as a tech person. I'm an industry executive. I don't believe there is a company that is not going to be tech focused. That is where we are. Every single company is going to have tech stack. They're going to have some type of technology they're building within their company. So it's probably too early for me to say that to investors again, but that is my belief. Is there not going to be a company that's not using technology?
Well, first of all, I couldn't agree more, but it's not a new statement, right? We in comms have been saying that well, let's say a certain number of us, according to PR Week, 25 of us maybe each year, but no, I know a very broad number of people have been very involved in the commtech area. And, for me, I mean, commtech or commstech, it's funny. I love the difference there because I think it was, we started calling it commtech, Page Society is calling it commtech, and then Edelman comes around and starts calling it commstech. And now like you have to do 2 hashtags, that's the world we're in now. But either way, vanilla, it's still the same thing. And, we've been talking about it for years and perhaps living in a little bit of a bubble because we think everybody's talking about it because we do. But you're 100% right. I'm always amazed when we do an event or when we talk about, commtech, and you have all these people, CCOs, right? CMCOs, people who are really advanced leaders in the profession who are going, I need to get a handle on commtech. I need to get a handle on this still. So you're, 10,000%, I think, right when you say that all companies are going to have this digital, communications and marketing kind of integration. If they haven't already, I think it's already too late maybe for some of them, but I mean, certainly for enterprise companies, but I don't know. I think it's a really important point to make. So the other thing is that I think many of us in this space are the same corp comms or marketers first. And we discovered the technology that just makes our jobs better, easier, or helps us advance. There's a little selfishness there.
Yes.
But ultimately it serves the customer and the client better. And, that's the future. So, you want to equip yourself with the tools to continue to be relevant, right?
Yes.
And I love the fact that you've seen that, okay, commtech addresses media, but what about those other channels that are so critically important? And I think that media is becoming less important over time in terms of the amount of time that we devote to it. It's still a very important channel, don't get me wrong, but we devote so much time to media and for a decreasing rate of return. So what about those other channels, right? And having the technology to back it and measure it,
yes,
is so critically important. But you were saying about how you were comms person first, then saw the way technology fit in, and then you were leading me to Sproxxy, and I apologize for interrupting.
No, it's completely okay. You do not have to apologize. So I just felt like there was a huge opportunity. I looked and saw the growth in PR and comms. I, again, worked in corporate comms in-house and in agency. I know about the 80-hour work week or more. There is a lot that the PR corporate comms person does day to day. And again, on a selfish level at first, Sproxxy was just to prove that I was doing a good job for my clients. I wanted to prove that I was doing a good job and that I wasn't just trying to send someone somewhere, and that there was rationale and there was data to back up why I was saying what I was saying, And so that was I also needed to cut the time that I was devoting into manually doing the process. So that was the original concept of why I was building Sproxxy. It was really just to have a data-informed approach on why we're selecting conferences, what's the return on it, how am I moving the needle as a marketing or communications executive on behalf of this brand. When there's more events to choose from, the budgets are being cut. Now there's AI. How do we use data and AI to get more insights that otherwise we may not have been able to get because we have the 80-hour work week juggling everything?
For sure.
It's just to accelerate whatever your head of corporate comms or your comms team is currently doing. That was really the only goal of Sproxxy is to accelerate and to have a data-informed approach and to show the real value of our work. And that was the rationale. That is why I became a tech founder. That is really the reason.
I'm glad you went through all that and said that, and you kind of lead directly into what is probably going to be my ultimately, last or second to last question for you, which is about AI, because you had said the advent of AI. I didn't put two and two together necessarily thinking about Sproxxy, but you'd started thinking about and developing it, during the pandemic. ChatGPT launched in November of 2022. So you weren't initially developing it with generative AI in mind, right? I mean, maybe there was some elements of AI you're employing. So what do you see as, and I know now because, we've been talking about this kind of stuff, but I know that, of course, AI is integrated into your platform in several ways. So how are you looking at AI, both for Sproxxy, but also as it affects our profession?
So there's actually something that I share with people is now when you go to a conference, you could be sitting in the audience watching a speech, and there is AI that is watching the audience to see if the messages from the spokesperson on the stage is resonating. So they're watching the people in the audience to see if you're responding back to what the person is saying on the stage. That is where we are currently. Like, that is actually something that you should be finding out from the conference organizer as the comms person to see if your messages are resonating with the audiences. So the train has left the building, or whatever that phrase is. It's like AI is here now.
Of course.
For Sproxxy, before Chat GPT and everything, I already was looking at other PR solutions. And I know that, from my past working on media solutions, you could get predictive analysis on what's going on in an industry well in advance and literally tell your client or your boss, like, what you expect is going to happen in the industry based off of a media software that you're doing. So for me, I felt you can do that with conferences. Why can't you do that with conferences? You could probably find out so much about conferences and the state of conferences and in the future of what your industry is doing just by gathering the data and finding out behavior, based off of what people are saying, based off of the type of programs that's being pushed out, and also based off of users on the platform, what they're doing. You can start to build intel and insights off of, well in advance, tell people what's going on in their industry just by gathering and analyzing data. So when I think of Sproxxy, I don't think of it as a solution just to find a conference, or a solution to just pitch your executive to be on a speaker, on the stage. I look at it as a solution that gathers data, analyzes data, and provides you insights. And as we gather more and more and more data, the AI would provide more insights that will help refine your strategy, as far as what you should be doing as a marketing or comms professional, or what's even happening in your industry. So a prime example of this is last year I went to South by Southwest. And one of the main questions I always ask is can you tell me the demographics of the audience and how has it changed? So I went in okay, what's the difference between pre-pandemic and this year? How has the audience changed? Where is the audience coming from? What countries are coming to this conference this year? And I found out that last year, where before it was Japan, those type of countries, last year it was Brazil, so it was more BRIC nations that started going to South by Southwest. So what does that tell you as far as brands go and as far as the industry goes? That is a huge insight based off of audience and the change of audience and where people are coming, what countries people are coming from to go to a conference, a huge industry insight for a potential user or for someone that knows how to ask the question if you're still going to do it manually.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, sure. I mean,
that is what I see with Sproxxy.
It's almost like an economic, well, if you look at South by, it's so massive, that could be an economic indicator all by itself. I keep thinking, as you were talking about Sproxxy, I kept thinking about, okay, can we predict next year's topics for these big conferences, well in advance so that we can start to tailor our thought leadership platform to kind of be parallel to that, so that when we go to the conference, we're more likely to get a speaker spot. And also when we go to the conference, we're more likely to have relevant content to produce, and so on and so on and so on. I mean, the hamster's running hard in my head, I will tell you.
Or a step further, can you influence the conference based off of you now knowing how the industry is evolving, and you're now the resource to tell the industry how it should evolve?
Wow.
We have a very, we say, accelerate innovation on a couple of our materials, and it's very generic, and everyone is like, that, it's so broad. But I have always believed, and this is probably like the geeky part of me, but my core belief is a single thought leader can completely change the trajectory of a full industry based off of knowing what conference, what audience to speak to, and how to influence that audience. And it sounds a little like he-ish, but at the same time, it is our job as communicators, and so with that approach, how can you influence the industry just off of the intel and the data that you receive on the
It's like, I don't know if you're a history buff or, I studied history. Part of my university long time ago was history. And there's there's something called the great man theory of history. And we have to rename that the great person theory of history. But it's similar, that one person can exert ridiculous amounts of influence if they're at the fulcrum at the right time, right? If they put their finger on the scale at the right moment. And I guess a conference is your opportunity as a communicator, but also for your executives, for your brand, to do that very same thing. I think that's a killer insight. The last thing I want to ask you, and then we'll just kind of take it home. And I think you've answered some of this, but just in general, I mean, what's keeping you up at night? What's the future looking like for you, for Sproxxy? Free thinking answer. Go for it.
What's keeping me up at night is I am a woman founder. I did start this journey off. I think my son was like 3 months when I decided I wanted to do this, which is a little crazy, when I think about it today. So what's keeping me up at night is Sproxxy. I am also on the Sproxxy train. What I saw, the vision of Sproxxy that I had initially wasn't like, I'm creating this for the masses. I was like, okay, I need this to serve my clients, to serve, this what I will be able to increase my revenue, just by being able to provide. That was the driving force. And then I'm like, okay, we can productize this. Let's, our head of corporate comms know this. I'm like, let's make us an Instagram team, small and mighty, Now it's like, okay, this is going to be much larger than what I expected, and we're getting interest from global organizations that want to use Sproxxy globally already. For sure. Even before we launched the product, we just announced the launch of the product in February. So what's keeping me up at night is me also being a part of this train. It's exciting. I remember, ahead of Sproxxy, I'm like 20 years is doing the same thing. Why am I still doing this over and over, the same thing? So it is exciting. And I call myself scary fearless because I am actually an introvert. I mean, I sound like one right now. I just know my profession as a corporate comms person. And I'm also fearless. I'm the prime example of scary fearless. If there was a picture, it would be me. I am scared to do everything, but I will also jump into a river. It's a little crazy with me. What's keeping me up would be I'm excited about what's ahead. and I'm also terrified about what's ahead. It's exciting because Sproxxy is evolving on its own.
Yeah.
I'm excited that this was a vision that I was able to just push forward, even just to be a part of. I have an excellent team that decided to be a part of this journey with me. And I always think, if not you, then who? Like, I'm not necessarily as I said again, I wasn't looking to be a tech founder, but if I was to leave something with your listeners is, for one, we need more solutions for people in corporate comms and marketing.
Here.
And two, if not you, who? I did have a really good career. I was also doing the 80 hours. It wasn't a guarantee that Sproxxy was going to happen. Sproxxy name literally came together because I'm like, speaker proxy, that's the name. It wasn't like I gave it a lot of thought. Even the logo was just like, I saw it, I'm like, okay, that's the logo. We have been just riding the wave. And again, if not you, who? Mm-hmm. Because we all need the help. When you start speaking to your peers, you will find out they all have the same issues and we all need the help. So.
Speaker proxy, Sproxxy.
Yes.
You have, now I can sleep. I was trying to figure that out. Scary Fearless, Melanie Samba, Scary Fearless. I'm seeing how accurate that is. You clearly are fearless, and I am scared. So thank you for that. I mean, this is amazing stuff. I mean, I think that this is a groundbreaking platform, and if I were you, I'd be kept up at night with like, holy moly, what am I going to do with all the clients and customers that are coming in? Wow, it'd be excitement. I'd be just jazzed up all the time. And because I think it's just a brilliant future for you. Listeners out there, you can find Melanie at Sproxxy.com, SPROXXY.com. And then on LinkedIn, Melanie Samba. I don't think there are any other ones. I think it's just you. And where else? Any other places that people should look for you, Mel?
Those are the two main.
Those two main.
We are on, do you call it X now? We are on X as well.
I like to call it Twixter. Because I'm never sure. But you're on X now, okay. Yeah.
The brand is not
as Sproxxy.
Yeah, as Sproxxy, and Instagram as well.
All the socials at Sproxxy, Melanie Samba on LinkedIn, and then of course, check out Sproxxy.com. It is it's growing. It's adding more functions. It is really at the cutting edge and leading edge of helping anyone out there to understand how to deal with these crazy conferences, but more than that, how to exert influence and how to make your speakers shine. And I think that's really what we're all about at the end of the day. So Melanie, thank you very, very much for joining me on the show on the Trending Communicator, because you definitely are a trending communicator.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the invitation.
You got it. Thanks for taking the time to listen in on today's conversation. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to subscribe through the podcast player of your choice, share with your friends and colleagues, and leave me a review. 5 stars would be preferred, but it's up to you. Do you have ideas for future guests or you want to be on the show? Let me know at dan@trendingcommunicator.com. Thanks again for listening to the Trending Communicator.